You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast.
Hello, welcome to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Its purpose is to dissect horror films, both old and new. We've been dedicating this current season to John Carpenter's middle work and his later years' work. Those that have been tuning into our podcast from previous years and previous seasons know that we already did a season looking at his early stuff. But now we're going to start looking at the rest of the canon of his work. And this time we're going to be looking at Prince of Darkness, which came out in 1987. And this has been an interesting journey for me. And I'm going to kind of just discuss and talk about that along the way as we kind of get into the nitty-gritty of the film and its impact. Because I feel like it's been about 20 years since I last watched this film, which it sounds a bit strange because I definitely remember it had a significant impact, and I'll mention that in due course. So those that are new to the podcast, what we do is we kind of start talking through these films, the impact it had on us when we first watched it, particularly the older films that we talk about, and whether it resonates still today with us, whether part of that's nostalgic, and the other part is whether we believe that we would recommend it to a modern going audience today who may not have seen it. My name is Saul Muerte, and I'm the lead surgeon of the podcast. And joining me to discuss this film is none other than Oscar Jack. Welcome aboard, Oscar.
It's good to be back at the operating table, Saul.
Yeah, it's good to have you on board. Now, last time we chatted, we were talking about a lot of the Stuart Gordon kind of films, the late great Stuart Gordon, and I mentioned it purely because I had a very similar reaction to when I watched this Prince of Darkness recently to the reaction I had with From Beyond. There's a lot of nostalgic elements in there, a lot of visual kind of stuff at play, and there's a lot of particularly with Prince of Darkness, has been likened to kind of like this Dali-esque kind of stuff with the dream sequences that's used. There's a lot of surrealist kind of visuals at play. And that's the sort of stuff that really stuck with me from my memory of watching it. And I have to stress that I cannot confirm or deny that I may or may not have been under the influence the very first time I watched this way back when. And that would have had a crazy impact, particularly with the visuals and stuff that was happening at the time, and it is the whole kind of concept. The whole place is like in this kind of real abandoned kind of place and setting, and my memory of it was like lots of these little rooms and like this kind of weird kind of entity thing in a like green entity thing that's being used, and lots of throwing up and body horror kind of moments that were in it. But the mirror in particular was the big thing. Like there was something about the mirror and stuff, and that was what stuck with me in my mind. And so I was kind of really keen to look at this again. And when I was reading some of the reviews and stuff to kind of get some background on it now, I have to say I was a little bit surprised that there was a lot of negative flack that was thrown its way. But I wonder if that is in part to do with a lot of like the back kind of display of work that John Carpenter has been renowned for. He's done a plethora of movies with a lot of great names attached to it, but with great stories and stuff that he kind of was telling at the time, particularly through the 1980s. And we'll talk about some of that in a moment. But before we get to that journey and John Carpenter's journey, I just wanted to ask you, Oscar, like what was your journey into Prince of Darkness? How did you come to see this film?
Well, I think with Prince of Darkness, it was the same kind of story that has been the case for a lot of the particularly horror films that we've spoken about. I saw it kind of in the early days of my kind of film love and specifically my horror love by just kind of catching it on Foxtel, catching half of it and then waiting till it was back around and watching the rest of it. I saw just countless movies. The amount of time that I had, it just kind of makes me a bit sad that I don't keep that kind of rate up nowadays. But Prince of Darkness was definitely one of the early ones. And it may have even been one of the early Carpenter movies that I saw.
Okay, right. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Because that's kind of what I was saying. And he had such a plethora of movies that came out at this time.
Absolutely. 80s, the 80s of domination where he's got 1980, he's got The Fog. Next year, it's The Escape from New York. Next year, it's The Thing. Next year, it's Christine, then Starman. Then we have 1 year break. He takes 1985 off.
For whatever.
For some unknown reason. Inexcusable. And then he jumps back in with Big Trouble in Little China, then Prince of Darkness, then They Live, and then he takes the last 2 years of the decade off. Like, that's just insane. 8 years in 10 movies. 10 years, 8 movies, rather.
That's it.
Flip that, reverse it. It's like that's so prolific. That's like that's only kind of rivaled by like Woody Allen's output, where he's got a movie out every single year. Like, I mean, who else is making these? And for so many of those movies being just like absolute classics, cornerstones of particularly 80s horror, but just horror in general.
And he the thing about Carpenter is that he weaves a lot of fantasy elements into his movies as well, and I guess some of the criticism that kind of may have been thrown his way is that he was leaning more into that as we come into this kind of latter end, like the sci-fi kind of component comes in, and I know I do wonder, and I maybe will try and answer this question as we delve through it, but whether, like I said, people are rating this movie against the other films that are slightly higher caliber. But like, you know, I'm gonna I'll go out and kind of say right now is that even when I rewatched this, I really enjoyed rewatching it, and I love. Do you know what I loved? I loved the whole build-up sequence before anything begins. I loved the way that it jumps around, and we're introduced to certain characters here, a little bit of the characters here, and slowly, like, this is kind of forming together as they're going to be kind of drawn to this building to oversee this science project, right? And it kind of reminds me. Go on, sorry, Oscar. Go on.
Well, it like if there's one movie that I think fits this, if there's one word that fits this movie, it's atmospheric. And speaking with that opening, it's 11 minutes of intercut scenes introducing all of your characters and the credits cutting in. So even though, you know, you get Prince of Darkness, you get the title right at the beginning, and then it just kind of keeps on cutting to black between these little moments where you're just kind of getting a kind of tone and vibe and intrigue, and you just kind of reels you in where you're like, what's going on? You get these little snippets of the great Victor Wong being a carryover from Big Trouble in the year before, as well as
Dennis Dunn is the other guy that comes from Big Trouble. Yeah, and that's the point. That's the thing. There's a lot of faces in this too, and a lot of kind of regular Carpenter kind of actors that come into this. And you've mentioned Victor Wong and Dennis Dunn, but obviously Donald Pleasance is the big one, which has been in a lot of movies that Carpenter has filmed. But the other guy to mention is Peter Jason, who. He's one of those guys that you kind of see his face, he kind of looks familiar, but if you actually look at his filmography, he often plays like those support kind of characters, right? But he's been in a lot of kind of big hitting films like 48 Hours, The Karate Kid. He was in Bruce's Millions, and he was in Red Heat, Alien Nation, The Hunt for Red October.
Mortal Kombat.
Yeah. Dante's Peak is in there. But coming back to John Carpenter, it's, this was the first collaboration he would have with Carpenter, but he would go on to be in They Live. He would be in the Mouth of Madness, Village of the Damned, Ghost of Mars. So he becomes a big kind of regular player in Carpenter's work. And Carpenter's known for kind of reusing a lot of actors anyway, so like this is no difference to what we've seen in the past. But it's, I don't know about you, but I kind of, if we look at Victor Wong, like the movie that sandwiches the two, that he was like, this was his kind of, he was at his prime from an American viewing audience, is concerned. This is like he was at his peak at this point, because obviously we had Big Trouble and this, but sandwiched in between that is The Golden Child, which was the Eddie Murphy flick as well. So like which, you know,
and you've got Tremors as well.
Yeah, and he'd come back for Tremors, of course. How can I forget that, Jeb? Yeah. So and to me, his presence is so iconic. And
he's just the great Victor Wong is what
he is. Yeah,
he brings so much gravity and like character and personality and just just kind of wonderment to it.
No, like I don't mean to kind of talk on a sour note, because when I was reading up about Victor Wong as well, just in the lead up to this as well, was like I didn't realize, but he passed away on like literally on the eve of when the World Trade Center was hit. And so he passed away. Like, so he was worried. Apparently, he was worried about his son, I believe, and because with everything kind of going on, and he was up with his wife, and they were talking, and found out his family was okay. But that night, he ended up having a heart attack, and that's what he died from. And it's such a tragic end, you know, like to his life, you know, like. And you only wonder if that was the stress of that event kind of having on him or not. I don't know. I might be putting 2 and 2 together and making 7, but it just made me kind of really, because I was like, my pool was like, what happened to that guy? Because like he was so good in those kind of that time frame with the movies. But yeah, anyway, so look, he's so good in this. Like his role in this is the professor. He's like he's the scholar, right? And he's the polar opposite to Donald Pleasance's priest, who's the religion. So there's a lot in this film which and if you read up on it as well, like John, and it's no surprise, but John Carpenter said he was inspired when he was researching theoretical physics and atomic theory. And that's kind of like the gem of what he's kind of molding this into. And he said like it would be interesting to have some evil entity that's combined with this kind of idea of like matter and antimatter, and that's kind of that's his Play-Doh. That's kind of what he's molding in this kind of gem of the film. And you can kind of see that a little bit when you kind of see a lot, particularly when there's a lot of dialogue scenes that come about, which are either between the priest and Professor Howard Birach, which is the Victor Wong character and Donald Pleasance's character, or it's between the two, you know, the male-female leads, Brian Marsh and Catherine Danforth, that have these kind of interactions that sort of connect them and that. So look, we're starting to kind of delve into this a bit. So I think now's the time to kind of start talking about the film and dissecting it before we kind of get into too deep territory. And like we're saying, there's lots of these like nuggets of little moments that are happening in the lead up to it, and like you were saying, it's diced in between with these kind of credits and things. But the very first thing we see is a priest who's lying on his deathbed, and he's clutching what looks like a metal box, and it's almost like he's protecting it. It's like the thing he has to hold on to as he's on his deathbed. And I don't know if I needed to, I should have rewatched it, but there's a moment as he passes away and his hands go down by his side. I almost thought I saw like a little shimmer of light kind of flick across the box for one moment. And I need to look back at that and just see if that was just a trick of my eye or not. But if it was genuine, then there's something quite magical about that moment. I mean, there already is. Like, there's this kind of moment of like, why would this kind of priestly character be kind of holding so tightly to this thing, right?
I'll jump back in there because the very first thing we see is the full moon.
Of course,
complete and full, with John Carpenter's just wonderful music, synth music kind of coming in, with this priest lying there with a little metal chest on his belly. It really just draws you in.
It does.
You mean and you mentioned that it kind of watching this kind of harkened back to when you rewatched From Beyond.
Yeah.
And I think the thing with both of those movies and with both of these filmmakers is that they're filmmakers that put so much personality into their films that immediately you watch this and you're like, this is not like this isn't like a movie that just a Joe Schmo has directed. Like, this is someone who's like who can't help but make at the very least an interesting movie.
Yeah, and I don't know. That's the thing. And like John Carpenter's music is so like that. It's his signature. Yeah. So like, and I don't know whether it was part of that, and also that mix and that combined with the way things were edited together and that slow kind of drip feed of these like little stories, plus like, you know, the pulsation of the synth as it's kind of coming in. It slowly is kind of luring you in, and I felt that as I was rewatching it this time around, and I was just like, and I was willing to be absorbed into this world, and I think that has to say something to his craft as a filmmaker. And like I said, that's why I was surprised when we'll talk about this at the end, but why there seemed to be a lot of negativity around this film, because I personally enjoyed this film, and I enjoyed it again watching this time round. And yes, you could argue that it's not quite on par with like The Thing, but like, come on, what is like, that's one of the best movies ever put to screen. So, you know, but if you there's, I enjoyed the ride is all I'm going to say, and we'll talk about that ride as we go through it. So, so we have this priest, and he's he lets go of the box, and we soon learn later on that there's a key inside this box, and it opens an area beneath what is this kind of derelict church in like this real kind of rough neighborhood.
Middle of it, it's LA,
80s LA when it was probably at its roughest. And in this room is something buried deep within, and this is kind of all we're aware of. Well, we're not even aware of at this point. Like, this is how we're drip fed it as it's slowly kind of unfolding.
Yes. Well, and it's a really and I was kind of mildly dreading talking about this movie because of the structure.
Yeah.
Because you can't really talk about it in terms of chronologically as you're watching it, because it does just kind of jump in and out of all of these different characters.
Yeah.
You kind of have to look at the chunks of action and because like all through this 11-minute opening, you're getting the priest, you're getting we're visiting meeting Donald Pleasant's priest character, who is named Priest. He's just Priest.
He's just
Priest in the credits.
Yeah.
And he's kind of he's picking up the chest, and he's going to this church, and we see he notices as he's out the front of this church this homeless woman down the street who is kind of almost praising the sun, and it goes in close, and you can see ants that are crawling over her face, which kind of mirrors when we first meet Catherine and what's his name? Catherine and Brian, our two kind of young students, youngish students, grad students, and diving into Professor Birak's class, as he's kind of introducing to us a lot of the things that we're going to need to kind of get behind, as he's talking about kind of theoretical kind of metaphysical things, where he's talking about time is not real, time isn't real, these things aren't real, like this is all right. He's kind of throwing big hard balls straight at us. And even during this part, the priest is sending he sends a correspondence to Victor Wong. They send a nun who walks down the street, walks down through the halls of the college, and gets Victor Wong, and it's still, we're just getting these credits all the way through, just black on text. There's so many characters in this movie.
I had a moment of like where I wasn't
it really, I kind of liken it to The Fog and The Thing,
Yeah.
where there are lots and lots and lots of characters that even on multiple viewings, you're probably not going to catch names.
no, that's right.
You kind of, they're not character deconstructions, these ones. These are like big casts of characters who are just thrown into the most insane situation and all have to try and struggle to survive for it.
Yes.
And with a group that is that big, you don't really know who's going to survive.
No, I mean, your money is sort of like you think it's going to be on the male and female leads. Like if you were going to hedge your bets, you're going to go, well, that's who we're obviously going to be following, right? And yeah, so but the rest of it, they're up for they're going to be picked off one by one. That's how we kind of feel like it's going to occur. And you're right, there's a lot. I mean, I just want to touch on something because you were talking about how it's similar, like cast wise and as in the group of cast is very similar to like you said, The Thing and The Fog. But I also the structure of the story and the way it drip feeds a bit almost remind me a little bit of one of his early films, Assault on Precinct 13, as well. In that, like these little things are starting to happen, and eventually it all centers into the one building, which in that case is the Precinct 13, and in this case is this derelict church, where everything kind of goes a bit crazy. And even very similar things where, like, the homeless kind of all stand outside watching is very similar to the Assault on Precinct 13, where we have these kind of unknown thugs that kind of like are lurking in the shadows and they're being watched. So to me, there's a lot of similarities between those two films. But yes, you're right. So we're introduced to a lot of things. And the other thing I wanted to touch on with the Donald Pleasance bit, where his priest character turns up, and like you said, there was that woman who's looking up and praising the sun. There's a point where she touches his hand, and he kind of pulls away a little bit, and she's got a little cup of maggots. Yeah. But there was something in particular about the way the focus was on the shot where she touched his hand in particular that kind of went, and it lingered for a moment that made me go, oh, what was that about? And I just want to put a pin in that because I'm going to come back to that when we get to the moment, right? Because there's a definite reason why that has an impact and why Carpenter chooses to hang on that shot. So you're right. So Pleasance then goes to call for help from the professor, which is the Victor Wong character, and he decides that he will gather together his group of these kind of physics students to investigate the room, which has this mysterious cylinder in the basement of this church that we mentioned. And this cylinder in question has this kind of weird kind of green gooey liquid kind of pulsating inside of it. And it's this vortex. Yeah. Which again, kind of, playing on the colors and stuff with the Stuart Gordon thing. And obviously green is very Reanimator, but it kind of just reminded me like a little bit of the use of green as a liquid as well. And the students who are in attendance. So we have, I've got the names here. We have Walter, which is the Dennis Dunn character. We've got Susan, and she's the blonde-haired girl that's in the group, and then we have Wyndham, and he's the blonde dude with the long mullet, and we have Kelly, who is so she's the girl that first gets possessed just to kind of afford a massive jump. Is that right? No. Well, see, because that's the wrong one. Now. Oh no, hold on. Susan is the one with blonde hair. Right. So hold on. So who's
Kelly is the one with the mark who wakes up with the mark on her.
I've got the two the wrong way around. Gotcha. Yes. Okay. All right. Got you. All right. So then we also have Rounding out the group, we have Lisa, who is the Asian kind of girl that's in that.
Yeah,
so she's
who is a translator.
Yeah, she's like a linguist,
like
kind of
theologian, linguist.
Yeah. And
they've all got their different.
They do.
It's a real kind of science expedition to the inner LA church.
Yes. And then we get Catherine, who's the redheaded kind of enigmatic kind of presence that captivates our kind of our lead protagonist, if you will, which is a guy called Marsh. And then Marsh is like, oh, by the way, Marsh is played by this guy called Jameson Parker.
Jameson Packer.
Now, he has the most awesome moustache in this, and I cannot but stare at it the whole way through this film. It's a magnificent moustache. He should be very proud of it. But I have to admit that it slightly kind of took me away. I found it just as mesmerizing as the mirrors later on. So that kind of rounds the group. But so Marsh is a metaphysician who, so he's kind of among the group, but he's interesting kind of character because like we kind of often watch him and could be viewed as a bit creepy because he kind of keeps following the Catherine girl around the campus and not really doing anything, just kind of watching her from afar. And eventually kind of like their paths kind of meet when all this kind of stuff starts, just before this stuff starts happening, before they go to the church, because Victor Wong's character gets taken off by the priest, the nun. And he has his conversation with Donald Pleasance, who kind of talks about what's going on and why he wants him to come and be involved with it and help him with this mysterious cylinder in the basement. And so they have this kind of exchange, but it's they're hitting it off. They seem to be going okay, and then he throws in a bit of a weird line that just makes it really awkward between the two of them. And there's a moment where they could lose that spark, and he kind of just does this whole thing of, let's just stop. Can we just start again? This isn't how I played it out. I envisioned asking you for coffee or something like that, and then they end up in bed together, as they do.
Well, I think they do. They get dinner that we don't see, and then the second time is they go for coffee.
Yeah, that's right.
So and this is all. I think this is still within the the first 12 minutes, maybe even the credits. So we get their first meeting, their first date, and then their second date, and then them sleeping together.
Yeah.
As they kind of wake up on the Friday morning when they're about to start this kind of expedition
to go along to the place. That's right. So and I guess the point of their relationship is that it's love at its infancy, and so it's this kind of it gives us as a viewer that kind of hook to kind of, and that invested interest in them surviving through the night, right? So and yes, we're cut through it really quickly, but I guess because it's new love, but because they're quite mature for their I don't know what age they're supposed to be, but they come across as mature, right? So you kind of feel like if this relationship is going to happen, it's going to be a serious relationship, or has the potential to be a serious relationship. So we're invested in this couple. Now they find, when they go to this church, I don't know what and forgive me if I'm jumping around because a lot of this kind of stuff is kind of a bit kind of all over the place. But at some point they read, there's these written passages that is next to the cylinder, going back to the green liquid cylinder. And it's discovered that this liquid is actually Satan, the devil incarnate. And the liquid itself appears to be a living organism, which is kind of producing like this strange data. They have all these kind of computers and stuff kind of set up, and it's kind of reading almost like how seismographs are set up. So it's kind of reading these kind of pulses and stuff that's happening within this kind of liquid cylinder, within the liquid within the cylinder. And one of the students Yes. Oh, that's right. So they all kind of descend on this derelict church, and they're all kind of getting set up. And so we have this kind of main core group that we've already been introduced that are part of, for want of a better kind of a description, they're part of the Victor Wong clan of students, psychic students, which we kind of introduced a minute ago. Joining them is also another group, which, as I mentioned, is overseen by Peter Jason's, the Dr. Leahy characters, and he has a group of experts that also come into the mix. And among them is this almost like a bit similar to the Asian lady that was kind of deciphering languages. This guy is a bit of a computer expert, so he's the one that set up. It sounds like he's the one that set up all the equipment and stuff, and he's just a kind of geeky character. And he's going to be, unfortunately, he's going to be our first victim too.
And he's the only person who is not staying the night. He's just there to set everything up.
That's right.
And he says he's the only one who's escaping before they're all kind of locked in for the weekends.
Yeah.
This guy who kind of breezes on in, and you get a little taste of him with everyone else. And as he's kind of heading off, and we get our kind of one of our big cameos in the film. With Mr. Alice Cooper as our lead homeless possessed man as he's kind of walking down. It's one of these other really great little kind of this imagery is as this nerdy guy is heading off for the night, and he finds this pigeon that has been crucified to a small cross that's been left in the alleyway.
Yeah,
and he looks up behind himself and sees all of these homeless people who have all just been watching, and everyone's kind of been aware of this kind of growing group of homeless people who are kind of very much likened to the ants that have been a kind of reoccurring image of this kind of this hive of more and more people. And as this guy kind of looks behind himself, he sees that there's a big group of them who are kind of coming down behind him, and he heads forward. And then there's Alice Cooper with a half bike, which I had read that was a part of his act.
Yeah, it was like an impaling device thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he used
and
on
so
stage.
He gets to do his... Yeah, he gets to use it in with movie magic as he impales this poor guy with his bike, and he drops down dead. There's a lot of as people start kind of being picked off. It's like they really get picked off out of sight.
Yes,
and people, the group does not realize that people are dying until well into it.
Yeah, that's right. I think because the building's quite a big building too, and there's lots of these kind of little pockets and stuff. So that's exactly right. There's like these moments where things are happening and nobody is aware of it, because from their point of view, it's an abandoned building, right? And they are just kind of watching and studying, and even they've not been really told the full picture of what it is that they're there for. They're just hired guns.
Each of them get little pieces of information, which is like into their kind of fields of expertise, where one of the girls is doing the carbon dating on the kind of sediment on top of the canister, and she says, that it's 7 million years old, and that's another one who's deciphering this big book that you'd mentioned that says, that kind of has all of the info that they're translating from. Yeah, it has. It's a kind of a really interesting prop, because it looks like that there are so many different authors rewriting literally the pages. And so it's really kind of hard to decipher. There's so many different authors, and you can see partially through older texts, and there's also all of these numbers, and they discovered that they've got differential equations in this book, 2,000 years before they, figured out what a differential equation was. This has got it's got math. It's got so much math. It's got so much.
It's a lot of maths going on. Yeah.
God, yeah. It gets stripped in more and more information as more of it is translated, gets stripped to us, the audience, where we're like, okay, I guess that's Satan in the tube. Okay, I guess it's super old. Okay, I guess, they're talking about Jesus came and Jesus was a terrestrial,
Yes.
and you're just like, okay, oh right. I mean, of course, he was an alien, a human-like alien. And
yeah, there's a lot of info that can be easily missed within the jargon and the mathematical kind of conversations that are being said, both theological and spiritual conversations that come out of this. But I think you kind of just got to be taken along for the ride with it. I felt like you just got to allow yourself to go with that suspension of disbelief and just be taken on that journey.
Oh yeah, I mean, I love all of that stuff. All of that. I love, and I feel like I've said it before, is that I love science in my horror, in my fantasy. I love scientists. I love, I love them doing experiments or monitoring things and having their little minds, their little science minds blown.
It's cool. So this is the question. So we've kind of said about how the one of the guys has been killed off, and we get a kind of a series of these things starting to occur, and a lot of fractions that are happening with a lot of the groups. We have the Wyndham character, and he's outside talking with two of the others, and he's kind of saying, "I'm not buying it. I don't want to be a part of it." So he's almost kind of saying that I want to tap out. This is crazy. What we're talking about doesn't make any sense, and it can't be real. So he's almost kind of saying, "Yeah, I'm done." And the others two go back in, and this is where he kind of gets. Also kind of has a bit of an out-of-body experience where these bugs start crawling over him, and then he's distracted for a moment, and then the woman, homeless woman lady that we saw at the beginning, suddenly kind of comes out of nowhere and stabs him several times with these kind of scissors. And like brutally kind of decimates him really in this kind of savage, frenzied attack. And the guys again aren't aware that he this has happened to him, because from their point of view, he's left. He's just gone because he doesn't want to be a part of it. So we have this kind of. It's hard to know the time frame of when these things occur, because I got the impression it was over one evening, but I think there's a few things that are happening that it may be a couple of days that it takes place, because there's a moment where
I think it.
Yeah, is it one night?
Well, I think it is one night. I think it all pretty much runs into when it kind of all goes to shit. I think it's like maybe 2 or 3 in the morning. I think they drop that line.
Right,
because then we do finally get the next day.
Yes,
I think. Though I mean, I wouldn't have minded them being there for the whole weekend.
Yeah, it'd been kind of cool. So but this is where there's a moment where there's down at with the cylinder, we get these small jets of liquid start escaping the cylinder, and we have
escaping upwards,
yes,
to the roof, dripping up.
And now I'm going to get the name of the girl wrong now, but one of the group,
Susan.
That's Susan, right? So she goes down.
She's the one with the glasses.
The one with the glasses. That's it.
Because like on my earlier point with how there are just so many characters, there is almost that self kind of aware moment, because there are so many characters, and also the characters don't all know each other, so they are describing each other to each other, saying,
"Yes, that's right.
Susan. Who's Susan? She's the one with glasses.
Yes,
the girl with brown hair with glasses. She's like, oh, she's that way."
Yeah. That's right, so, and that's kind of cool. I kind of like that as a bit of an in joke to what's going on as well. So so she's the one that kind of notices this thing, and she kind of is almost a bit transfixed and kind of slowly walks towards this thing. When as she's kind of approaching it and staring up at this kind of dripping motion, as we said, that's kind of going to the ceiling, this shoot of liquid kind of comes straight out at her, and into her face, and I think she swallows a little bit too. And at this point, this is where we don't know at this point, but this is where she becomes possessed, and and so she becomes a bit of a stalker kind of character for most of this next, like for the next bit of chunk. So at the moment, we're thinking, oh, okay, so is this a thing about possession, and she's going to be the one that goes around slowly picking people off? And part of that is true, but it becomes a bit more weightier than that as the story unfolds. And we have this moment. This is where a lot of crazy stuff happens in this section. This is also where outside, Wyndham suddenly appears again, and it's first witnessed by Catherine's character as she sees him outside, and he's calling to them, and they notice that he's got all these kind of bugs and stuff crawling over him. Have I missed it?
I think because that's the moment that all goes to hell. Yeah. I think that's because you still have. It's like what I said. It's hard to talk about this movie because it does almost feel like you're like, when did that happen? What? Which I think like adds to the whole kind of vibe of the movie.
Yes, yeah.
You have a few more conversations between the priest and the professor.
Yes.
You have them start having dreams.
Yes.
As people start kind of dropping off, you get these dreams that are, the movie is filmed on film, and then they cut to these dreams that are like videotape. It seems.
Yes, that's right.
Where you just get these little kind of tinny voice that says, "This is not a dream. This is a transmission."
Yeah.
As you kind of get this image of the outside of the church, and the priest kind of goes into it, and he tells you how it was basically a forgotten sect of the church was chosen to guard this place.
That's
and that
right.
anyone who lives and spends time around the canister all start having the same dream.
Yes.
The same dream about the outside of this place and about this eeriness, which might be a warning. It may be, they don't know what it is. It's a big kind of point of kind of philosophizing about the whole situation. But as people are starting to get picked off, I believe Susan breaks the neck of one of the dudes. Who goes down here.
That's right. Yeah. I forget his name, but he's the second dude. That's right. To kind of get killed.
With a great face, like great character.
Yeah.
Great character actor. He just gets his neck flat out twisted off, and he kind of gets forgotten and missed.
Until later on,
until he makes his appearance again. But this is where they're kind of finally kind of letting everyone in on it in terms of being, and there are lots of moments where they feel presences, like a cold wind kind of rushing through. There are worms on the windows. There are the homeless people who just keep on staring, and I kind of like, the fact of them kind of all discussing it together, of being like, they were there since we've been unpacking at 9 a.m. Like, there just seems to be more and more. And one of them, who's a psychology major, says how, this is weird, because, done studies on schizophrenic kind of behavior, and this is not it. This is really fucking weird.
Weird stuff. Yeah,
real weird stuff. It's, all of the kind of science and fantasy and religious talk is all kind of in this big chunk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Go on, sorry, Oscar. Go on.
No, which that all ends when Walter
Wyndham.
No, not when Wyndham. When Wyndham makes his appearance again.
He makes his appearance again. That's right. And so, like, he is standing outside, supposedly coming back from the dead, but from the point of view from these guys, is like, what's he doing standing outside? They aren't aware he's dead, but when they look at him, he's completely covered in these bugs and stuff. And he says the words, he has a message from Satan, but you're not going to like it. At which point his body erupts with beetles emerging from his body. His head loses his head, and more bugs crawl out, and his hand falls off, and he kind of just disintegrates.
His body just crumples.
Yeah. It's a beautiful moment. And Connor, is this the bit where Connor arrives? So he's the real tall African American dude who also is
where
he's possessed as well.
He's not possessed. He's not possessed just yet, because first you have Susan going in, climbing on top of Lisa.
Yes.
And barfing her green liquid into her mouth.
That's right. Yeah.
And possessing her, and it's when he kind of comes in and checks on Lisa, who's just kind of staring off as she's like typing away on her little translating machine. That's
a great moment too, because he comes in and like, because that's right, they're all gonna have this big meeting in the lab. That's right.
Yes.
And he comes in to tell her, and she's acting a bit bizarre. And it's what is it that's typed up on the computer? It's something like, it's a bit like
there is no hope.
There is no hope.
It's basically there's no hope. There's no hope. You're fucked, essentially.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah. And there's a great kind of deflection moment here where you see the other girl, the possessed girl, coming up from behind him, and you think she's going to be the one to possess him, and he kind of turns, looks at her, at which point the Asian girl suddenly comes up, and she's the one that deals the blow to the head.
Swipes him out of frame.
Yeah, that's right. I thought that was kind of a nice. I like that moment because you're led to believe one thing and it goes in a different direction. I thought it was cool. So look, he comes back though when all this kind of crazy stuff has happened, and he then kind of takes his own life, or tries to take his own life. He's got this kind of
he's sweating and he's laughing. He's
quite
laughing.
maniacally, and he's got this kind of broken bit of stair banister, and he jabs himself into the throat, and they all kind of throw themselves down on him to kind of pin him down. And at the same point, some of them then try to escape the church, but they realize that they're blocked in. The possessed homeless people have actually kind of barricaded them into this place. The professor and the priests realize that Satan is actually the son of an even more dangerous and powerful force of evil, this kind of anti-God character. So like Jesus was the son of God, Satan is the son of this other evil entity. So again, coming back to
the matter and antimatter. Yeah,
that's
the positive
exactly.
and the negative.
That's right.
That there must be this other person, this other being.
That's right. So it's Satan plans to bring this kind of creature into this world, and therefore damn them all for eternity. And the survivors have to kind of work out how to kind of and the dream stuff kind of comes up again in conversation. They talk about that and the visions. That is it, like you were saying, was it a warning? So that kind of conversation happens, or is it?
And it's more and more as the more and more they dream, the more of the dream is exposed.
Yes, that's right.
Them. So you only get that brief kind of section the very first time, but you get more and more of the message. You get them saying, like, we're sending this message from 1909, but you don't get the full year yet.
Yeah.
It's just kind of little bit. But also, one person who we've kind of missed, who becomes absolutely very important, is Kelly, who we mentioned earlier, who is kind of Catherine's friend. She's one of the grad students of that group, who wakes up and finds that she just has this mark on her that's basically like a reversed cross. And it's while she's kind of sleeping. And one of the translations comes through on the book saying that one will be chosen.
Yes.
One will be chosen. And basically she gets kind of basically brought, the canister is brought, or it's metaphysically there, its presence is there. It's basically there, and it basically pours all of itself into her.
But it hits the ceiling first, though, doesn't it?
Yes, it is just like a pool of water on the ceiling as it kind of pours out. And I believe it's Dennis Dunn who kind of comes in and sees it just pouring into her mouth as he kind of retreats into the little side bathroom there, as Susan and Lisa both kind of stand guard.
Yes.
As a bit of a metamorphosis happens.
Yeah.
As all of the other dead people kind of come back to life, and it basically turns into a bit of a Night of the Living Dead kind of situation of a zombie kind of break where Donald Pleasance barricades himself hides in one room, and then the rest of them hide in another.
Yeah.
With Dennis Dunn in the bathroom that is just in between, that is a wall in between.
We also have another bit.
Of go through the early morning, the early
that's right,
dark hours of the morning.
Just before that happens as well, we have another death scene though from the other doctor character who gets kind of spat in the face with the goo as well, and he kind of collapses down on the floor. So we're now down to kind of a very small group of people. So there's a lot of this kind of like a lot of crazy shit just kind of happens very, very quickly within like about a 10-minute window of footage. Yeah.
After a lot of talk, a lot of kind of talk and philosophy and kind of techno babble, and it all becomes past the time for talk, and there's the time for action.
There's a point just before this happens as well, and I forgot to mention this. This comes back to the priest character as well, and why I mentioned the thing about when the homeless woman touches his hand, because there's a bit where he goes to kind of give Connor's character the last rites, and he kind of stops and kind of goes, no, this kind of moment where he can't carry through the action of doing it. And the hand he happens to be doing it with is the same hand that was touched, and it's almost like I was just like, was that about? Was that part of Satan's touch that has gotten into him, and he's starting to lose faith and having doubts, right? And that's part of why when shit starts happening, he backs off and ducks into this room out the way. Because he's lost his conviction, his faith. He doesn't think he can handle it. And he basically hides behind this kind of water tank kind of thing, essentially. And he's cowering away back there. So I think that's why I made a big point, and that's why John Carpenter chose that moment to linger on that point, because it's almost the touch of that homeless lady onto his hand was that moment where Satan's got him, and it knows his weakness. So we have Donald Pleasance in one room. We have Walter in a room in the bathroom on his own, which is just off the side of where the crazy stuff's happening. And as you said, everyone else is barricaded in the other room. Marsh tries to lower himself down into the hallway. The alleyway outside. I think during this sequence too, and that's when the homeless people start to descend on him, and he has to try and scurry, and they pull him back up. So they realise there's no way out. They have to confront this thing, through hell or high water.
Walter, who is watching through the little kind of the little grate there, and he's watching this transformation happen to Kelly, who is she has this kind of pregnant belly when she's completely full of all of the goo, and over the kind of the early morning hours her skin starts turning this really kind of gooey, bloody. It's like she's got a bad case of the stigmata, but all over her body. Like
boils and kind of this putrid
it's
kind of
very
stuff.
Pastoral. It's real gross.
It's nice. I like it.
And it's when they kind of realize once the sun has kind of risen that Walter is on the other side of their wall, so they kind of start digging between the walls trying to get him out. As Kelly kind of finally wakes, as the kind of transformation is complete, and she is, I guess, essentially the kind of the chosen avatar of Satan, of Lucifer.
Yes.
Who kind of stands up and has this wonderful, almost kind of like Evil Dead kind of laughter.
Yeah.
As we've seen kind of before, that the goo, when it was in its container, was able to kind of essentially have a telekinesis and was able to move things.
Yes.
So with her kind of waking up, she kind of knocks a few things over and basically six her two little possessed goons to start ripping into the door to try and get Walter, who is able to kind of just worm his way out into the next room through the hole that they've made. As they kind of climb through, and it all just kind of becomes it becomes even more kind of hectic after relatively restful
or semi-restful
barricaded.
So like there's a bit where they manage to so I think you were saying they get Walter through the wall, as then the two girls are also kind of attached to him, and they're hitting them over the head with whatever they can get, and they basically grab her and throw her through this window, to the ground outside.
Flip her right over.
Yeah, and then they do the same with the other girl too, so that they kind of quickly kind of get rid of them. And then they have a point where they've opened the door back up, and another one of the zombies comes through. Victor Wong sprays him with a shuck-up soda can and then stabs him in the eye with a chopstick as the others kind of take whacks at him, and one of the other survivors gets a mouthful of the green spray. So he's he gets down and out too. So we're kind of basically left with Walter, Marsh, Catherine, Victor Wong's character, and the priests. They're the last kind of standing kind of survivors at this stage. So they're just before this. Yeah, that's right. So there's a point where the possessed Kelly character sees a small powder puff mirror on the floor. And so the mirrors are like the vessel of kind of transporting, or the way of trying to transporting this anti-god character in, right?
The negative realm exists in the mirror image of this place.
That's right. And so she's trying to use that mirror to pull their entity through, but it's too small. It doesn't work, and it just fractures and blows up. And the Connor character, he's still around. He is possessed, but he's in the room where Donald Pleasance is in, and there's a huge mirror in there, and it's almost like he's kind of groaning and talking to this mirror. And this catches the eye of Kelly, who goes in too. And so then this mirror starts kind of lighting up, with this kind of basically kind of lights up the whole of the mirror. Lots of smoke and stuff kind of coming from out of it, and all the others are trying to scramble and fight and get, they're trying to stop her from whatever it is that's happening. And the priest character, Donald, comes out, and he gets a bit of strength and conviction, and he's able to chop her. Oh no, what? Go on, what? Well, no. It's because she's starting to reach through into this mirror, and I always love the effect of getting a flat body of water and just putting it on its side, so it looks like it's like a wall of water. As she kind of twinkles her fingers in, and it goes in, and you get this kind of image of what's on the other side, and it's just like darkness and water. It's not really even water. It's just this kind of this void. It's the abyss. That's right.
Which is just this kind of really kind of such an eerie kind of thing. Which is when the priest kind of gets a bit of conviction and comes in with a fire axe and chops her arm off, and it's great. She does it, pulls a bit of a regeneration of the arm. The arm comes shooting back out, and he takes the head off, and then she kind of laughs as she puts it back on.
That's right. and I think she just kind of she just gets shoved. Gets shoved to the side, and he's kind of immobilized. So all this is kind of happening. Marsh is being attacked by some of the possessed people. It might be Connor actually, that's trying to, and he's kind of fighting with him, and the Connor guy is trying to get on top of him to spew on him, basically to kind of possess him. And so all this is happening, and then Catherine comes into the scene, and she's like sobbing because she doesn't know what to do. She kind of, and at this point, you could easily see her as like, because this often one of those tropes is that you get the kind of like the damsel who doesn't really know what to do and ends up being kind of a bit, reluctant or unwilling to kind of make that action or do anything, and you think you could be forgiven for thinking, well, that's the direction it's going to go, and she's just going to be,
she's going to be the helpless one.
Yeah, exactly. But no, she makes this kind of, she realizes that she has to do something, so she basically dives in, rugby tackles the possessed Kelly character, and they both go through the mirror.
Who Kelly was as she was reaching back in? Was pulling out it looks like a legit like devil, like it's red clawed hand that is coming out.
Yeah, that's it.
As they're kind of knocked back in, and then Donald Pleasant's priest he's got the power to go back in and throws the axe and smashes the mirror.
Yeah, that's it. So imprisoning Catherine in the realm beyond. And we have Marsh kind of just, no!
Well, and that you just get this kind of really brief shot of Catherine.
Yeah.
Almost as like a corpse being kind of like drifting into the darkness, away from the portal. And it's just this really, it's one of the kind of the many images in this movie that's just stays with me.
Yeah,
because
same.
it's just this, it's just so haunting as she just kind of drifts into the darkness.
Yeah,
and it's shattered, and you're just like, oh God.
No, it does. It is. It's this kind of like real. Because her hand's still almost like reaching back towards
it's where reaching
the mirror
out
is.
But
she's
away.
slowly drifting away from it. It's brutal, and then we kind of get shots from outside of the homeless people as they kind of drift off, but also the possessed people have all this kind of billowing kind of smoke coming out of their mouths and stuff, as like whatever it was that possessed them is no longer there. They're no longer under the spell.
The hive mind. The hive mind is gone, so the many pieces can't be controlled anymore.
And then Walter at this point then just runs off. He's the one that kind of gets out and just pegs it, essentially. Whereas the rest of them, the survivors kind of get rescued by the police and ambulance, and people kind of rock up, and we get what we feel is probably our climax coming to an end. But then there's a moment right at the very end of the film where we have Marsh, and he has his
dream.
Yeah,
we start with the dream.
Oh yes,
that almost seems like a little tag, which is the dream that we've seen of the outside of this church. As we get the full image, and it says, it is the year 1999 that we are broadcasting from. As it kind of comes around, and you see this figure stepping out of the church, and it is Catherine, who is kind of stepping out in this billowing kind of way, this kind of ethereal kind of vibe, which is when we get Brian waking up in his bed, kind of covered in sweat. Yeah, and then as he kind of looks over to his own mirror.
Oh, but before that, he looks over and he sees Kelly, the disfigured Kelly.
Oh, yes.
we had our dream within a dream moment, scare, and then he wakes up proper, and then he walks over to the mirror, and he walks slowly over to it, reaching out, and with his hand outstretched, and just at the point where he's going to touch the mirror, cuts to black, and the film finishes. But it kind of gives you the impression that the horror hasn't finished there. that there is still something beyond.
Yeah,
something will occur because it's 1987. It's not 1999 yet. So is it still a prophecy? Is it? Is there more to come? Which was kind of nice, I thought. A good kind of solid end. So when you watched it again, what did you feel like the film was just equally as strong from when you first watched it?
Yeah, I think so. It's maybe not from the very first time I saw, but particularly the first the first half, I really, really dig. Yeah, I think it kind of it does. There are, even though I like the amount of characters and how they kind of use that, I really do. I kind of like that. There's so much in this movie that if you are trying to really follow along and be like, okay, what's it's not really a mystery to be kind of solved, because it's all dealing with this kind of meta religious, scientific, pseudo-scientific kind of insanity that you can kind of be like, what is happening? There is so much. You are always getting so much new information about about Satan and Jesus and secret churches and all of that stuff. I kind of really love. I actually think that when it all kind of goes to hell, that it's it's kind of a little slow for me in just one of the chunks, just while they're kind of barricaded in the rooms. But really, other than that, I kind of come out of it and I'm just I'm probably going to watch that again in another couple of years, or I'll show someone that.
See, I think that's it. I think and this comes back to what I was saying before about look, it's definitely not on par with some of the real great classic Carpenter films. But having said that, it's not a bad film. I'd probably even put it I want to say a 7. Maybe it could be a 6, but it's hovering around there. So it's not crap by any stretch.
The idea is it is such an original idea, and it's such a unique film that I think for me it bumps it up to a 7, a 7.5. I really think it is really quite unique, which is always what I come out of it being there's nothing like it. And it's a bit Lovecraftian as well. Speaking of kind of Stuart Gordon, this kind of ancient evil, and kind of having what we have as the perception of evil and Satan, all that kind of stuff, is just kind of what we've kind of tried to make the truth more palatable. It's this kind of lie that I think the priest even says it's packaging, it's marketing. That we removed the greater evil and we made it an evil in the heart of man instead of what it actually is, this actual anti-God.
That's right. And it's interesting because I was reading up about this too, and Carpenter apparently wrote the screenplay, but he's credited as Martin Quatermass, right? Now, this is a big nod to Bernard Quatermass, which was a fictional character from British film and television.
Hammer.
Nigel Neal, coming back to Hammer. Now, one of those films that Hammer did was called Quatermass and the Pit. And that film is about Quatermass confronting an ancient evil. So you could argue that there is a little bit of that kind of, the fact that Carpenter's kind of crediting himself as in the screenplay as Martin Quatermass. There's a big nod to the fact that there's no disillusionment about this is what it's about. And Quatermass, the character Bernard Quatermass himself, is a professor of science, and a lot of the stories that followed around him from the BBC's kind of Quatermass experiment. When that kind of first came out in the early 1950s, was followed him in that kind of real, as you can imagine, 50s sci-fi kind of films. and that kind of science fiction storytelling, and they're kind of larger than life kind of stories. I think like mid 2000s, as in like 2005 or 6, the BBC did it again with Jason Fleming kind of playing Quatermass. I can't remember the name that they gave it. I never got around to watching it. I wanted to. But the Quatermass experiment, or the Quatermass in the Pit, was one of the ones that always struck me from the Hammer films. I always have a soft spot for it. So maybe that kind of lends itself to why I do dig this too. And I love the energy. Like you said, it's an atmosphere film. And if you buy into the atmosphere, I think it just pegs it up a notch. And I would go back just to watch that opening 11 minutes again. I just loved that whole journey of being kind of sucked into the story. And yeah, I agree with you that there are massive pockets where it can fall through the cracks a little bit, and you can kind of get a little bit lost. But I think overall, I did enjoy that run. And the other thing, before we are kind of going to bow out in a sec and just offer our last kind of thoughts on it. But just going back to the Alice Cooper thing as well. He actually did a song for this as well, which is called Prince of Darkness. And you can kind of hear it on being played very subtly in one of the characters' headphones as they're walking around listening to it. But that was kind of part of a little bit of a tidbit around the film and Alice Cooper's involvement. So with all that in mind, though, like I always ask this as we kind of come to the end of it. So we can't, like, yes, we feel like it's a good film. It's not the best. It is watchable. We did enjoy watching it this time around, and we would go back and watch it again. Would you recommend it, though, to a modern going audience? Do you think it's got enough there to pull people in or not?
Yeah, I absolutely do think I would recommend. I have recommended this to people.
Okay, there you
go. Because I think it is. Yeah, I think it's for the most part, it's a pretty safe bet that people haven't watched this, because it really is kind of fallen by the wayside, and it is one of the kind of the more forgotten Carpenter films. So it's generally something where I'm like, if you like horror, if you like weird heebie-jeebie science kind of stuff, then and if you like atmosphere and scores, and just looking at Victor Long's beautiful face for an hour and a half, then then it's always a big recommend for this one for me.
Yeah, cool. I would too, actually. I think there's something about this. I think because of the way it ends too, there's enough mythology there to kind of play around with it. It could warrant another journey back with Prince of Darkness. And the reason I'm saying that is because apparently a couple of years ago, John Carpenter dropped a little bit of a hint that he had been in conversations with Shudder, which is the horror streaming service, about potentially a television series of Prince of Darkness. And really? he said he couldn't talk about it more other than just that random comment. Other than that, he said that he was talking about doing a theme for it as well, which is where his involvement is with the music and helping with that. But obviously that I looked at when the article was written, it was 2 years ago. And yeah, part of me thinks we've obviously gone through a lot of things, and it may not materialize, but part of me thinks, do you know what? I could see that happening. I could see that kind of coming about and being something. You've got to be a bit careful, though, because obviously Outcast kind of played a very, the TV series that kind of had a very similar thing about entity and, dark matter and stuff. I mean, a very different beast entirely, so don't get me wrong. But that I'm just saying because that's a TV series that kind of tackled a very similar thing about something possessing these people. So you've got to do it in a smart way, and it might be about this kind of alternate mirror world, or this kind of hive mentality thing could come into effect. I don't know. I think there's something there, but that article kind of struck me, and I thought, oh, that would be interesting to see that, and I wouldn't mind watching that. Cool, man. I think on that note, it's our time to kind of bow out and say adieu to our kind of listeners out there. Let us know if this one's one of your. Would you recommend this film or not? How do you rate this amongst the other Carpenter films? Does it deserve the panning it got from critics at the time? Are you one of the people that believes it's, or are you part of the cult following? Are you part of the hive mentality that agrees that this film deserves more praise than it actually gets? Because I don't know. I don't know where I sit with that. I don't like. Yes, I would go back. I just think it's a good film. I think Carpenter did a lot worse films. Actually, there are a lot more turkeys in there that, which we will come and talk about in due course. Thankfully, though, the next one we will talk about is actually a highlight, which will be They Live, and I cannot wait to discuss that one with you. But please stick around and listen to some more of the podcasts as we kind of truck through these. If you haven't caught our other discussions, go back and listen to some of the other episodes where we've been talking about the John Carpenter stuff. Until then, I'm your host, Saul Muerte, and I'd like to extend my thanks to my offsider joining me to discuss Prince of Darkness with me. Thanks once again, Oscar Jack.
Pleasure.
Goodbye.
You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Music supplied by Peter Nezik. For more discussions or podcasts, head over to surgeonsofhorror.com or head over to our Facebook and Twitter sites for the latest news and updates.